My guest today, I would say she's an old friend because we've known each other since she began at Fairway, maybe a couple years after beginning at the company where I work. And I'll get into that in just a minute, but I want to do a very quick Zig Ziglar quote, which is truly changed my life and how I've changed personally over the last 5 or 6 years, which is you can have everything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want. And all of the books that I've read, from Jim Rohn to Earl Nightingale to Napoleon Hill, all of these old original business philosophers all have that same foundational pretense, which is service to others, right? You get more by being more for other people. You earn more by serving more. The more you give, the more you receive. And it's so amazing to me how just putting a few of those principles into practice in your day-to-day life, how immediately things begin to change for you. And that's kind of the culture that we live in the company I work for too. So it'll be cool to hear Kristel talk a little bit about that because I know she's in it as well. Kristel, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you taking the time. I know how busy you are with everything that we're doing in our industry right now. So first I want to say thanks.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Honored to be here.
So Kristel Pinckard is with Fairway Independent Mortgage, the company I work for. She's been here 8 years today. Today is the 8-year anniversary. How cool is that? And I want to do a very brief intro, but I feel like some of what we're going to talk about when we get into your why is going to relate a little bit to your past and where you grew up and where you find yourself. And I'm jumping to a conclusion there. But actually, not even like me, I'm in a small town of 12,000 people. Kristel's town had 1,100. So I get picked on for being in a small town. Kristel's grew up in a smaller town than I grew up in with 1,100. I laugh because 9 total streets in the whole town?
Yes, 9 streets.
And how big was the graduating class again?
26.
26 in the graduating class. Nice. I love it. Comes from a family, mom and dad have been married for 55 years. There's something really amazing about meeting people who've been married that long and meeting people whose parents have been married that long. Middle child with an older brother and a younger brother and an Aunt Kay of 2 girls and 2 boys from each of the brothers. And mom and dad are still in your hometown, still in the house where you grew up in Booker, Texas.
Yeah.
And now you're in Plano. And I want to go back to that graduation just so you can share that story. Obviously a really good golfer, graduated, and kind of shared a little bit of that story from graduating high school and going off to college and then off into the real world of golf as a business.
Yeah, so my dad was the football coach at the small town in Booker, but if you know any sport as a coach, you're coaching all the sports. So he was my golf coach. So he was the influence that got me in there. I was actually I liked basketball. I cheerleaded, but basketball was my passion and actually was intended to go play basketball in college. So I had a letter of intent signed, but found out my dad had sent my tape off of my golf swing to every women's golf program in Texas. So we're getting all these letters and I'm all like, Dad, what is this? I'm going to play basketball. And he's like, I kind of sent your tape out. And so nonetheless, I walked on at North Texas. So that's what got me down here. Booker's in the very northeast corner of the Panhandle. So we go to the state golf tournament in Austin, Texas every year. And we were actually closer to 4 other state capitals than we were our own. So it was like a 12-hour drive to Austin. So Dallas area is about halfway. So it was about 6 hours. So it's about 400 miles from home. So when I walked on at North Texas and where I thought I was ready to get out of the small town, it was quite interesting to see how homesick I was actually that first semester. But anyway, so I walked on and then I finished out my eligibility there in Denton and had an opportunity where someone was going to sponsor me to play professional golf. but I quickly decided that really wasn't my passion. That was more my dad's passion. As we could see, I went to college playing golf because of him. So I just decided that wasn't something that I wanted to pursue. So my golf coach at North Texas had moved to Florida. So he hired me and another girl on the team to go out there. So that's what started me on my golf career. That was really kind of what I felt like that I knew. I grew up small town. My mom didn't really work. Dad coached. So I didn't grow up in a career-minded type of mindset. So I didn't know what even jobs were out there. It was education or farming in the little town I was in. I didn't want to do either of those. So it was just golf. The golf business made the most sense. It's what I knew. So I did that. But again, wasn't really finding it that it was my true passion. Again, it was riding on the coattails of Dad. So I was looking to get out of it. I was at a local country club here, and one of the members found out I was leaving. So he's like, "Oh, we hear you're losing you." And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, I don't really know. And he's like, "Well, what do you want to do?" I'm like, I don't know that either, but I feel like I'm pretty user-friendly. Like, train me up on anything that, is fairly somewhat easy to learn. So they hired me on. He has a mortgage company. So that's how I got in the mortgage business, was coming out of the golf business into that. So what's really cool about that is Fairway. I got out of that. I'd worked at that job for about 9 years and then didn't work for a couple of years and then went back into the mortgage business. So whenever it was Fairway that called me, the recruiter, of course, she said, we have an office in Madison, or what was it, Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, I think at the time was the corporate office.
Yeah, Sun Prairie, yep.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, no, I don't really want to move anywhere in Wisconsin. And she's like, well, we have a corporate office in Plano. I'm like, oh, okay, now we can talk. So once I start to get to know it more, talk with John Brumfield, my interview. But I thought, how perfect, Fairway Mortgage, because given that golf business and mortgage were the only two careers I had. So I just felt like that was one more, sign that it was meant to be, even though Fairway has nothing to do with golf. I mean, I love the reason that why Steve named it Fairway, or his buddy named it that way. But for me, it was a golf analogy. So I felt like it was a sign.
I love it. I think, I have a neighbor whose son was a baseball player and a golf player. And as soon as we had our first daughter, the first words out of his mouth were, that the female golf scholarship is the most unused scholarship in America, and you should teach her how to play golf. And it's just so funny because here you are, right, living proof that
Yeah.
you walked on. And so it's interesting to me that you had a passion that rotated around a different sport. And I know golf is pretty committal, right? When you're in it and you're playing golf, like it's not a seasonal sport. You're pretty much in golf all year round. Was basketball done at that point when you went to college, or did you still get to play?
No, I played like intramural. I still got to play pickup on that level, so purely recreational. So, but that really was, that was my passion in the sense of where I felt like my competitive edge was the most. Golf was such a long, drawn out, it was weird because I get very anxious playing on the golf course. I would be very anxious, but you put me on the basketball court and I was like a beast. Like I had no insecurities, anything about my ability, because I wanted to be out there. In the golf, I just didn't ever really want to. And the odd thing is like I have a really pretty good golf swing. So it was just this anomaly, to watch my swing, watch me play was one thing. But if you could get inside my head and listen to what all was going on in my head, like I just didn't have any confidence at all. It was a struggle. And golf is like 4 hours around average. And when I'm out there playing in collegiate, we're playing 3 and 4 rounds a week. So it was really torturous, actually. And my dad would die if he knew that I was like that miserable with it. But I really just, again, wanted to please him. And it was just, but I learned so much from it now. I mean, I can sit back here now and glean what I got out of the golf business, because then it got me into, an area of business that I was able to kind of just still find my own way, but then be done with it when I was ready to be done with it. And then it found me my next avenue in life. And the Lord used it all. He's tied it all back in, but it was not golf was not enjoyable back then. And now it's kind of fun. So I'll probably tell more of that in my why story. But But I feel like now it's a gift that God's given me as far as the ability to play golf. And so now I use it now as precious time spent with my family, because we all play. Both my brothers went to college playing golf too. And my parents play. They go on golf vacations with other couples. So it's now become this like really way that we bond as a family. So it's interesting, full circle.
Cool that it's come full circle, right? That you go into something, and there's so many things in life that we find ourselves doing, whether it's a job or a hobby or a university or a circle of friends, where we may not be there because it's our number one decision to be there. We may find ourselves in this situation similar to you did. The cool thing is that you didn't. When I was that age, I was a little more rebellious, and I don't know that I would have demonstrated the commitment that you did to finishing, because I had this mentality of if it wasn't something that I was all in on, then I would rebel against it almost entirely. And now, as you said, in retrospect, I can look back on those things and appreciate the things that maybe I missed because I wasn't open to adversity, open to things that were a challenge, to things that maybe weren't my first inclination to do. And now I'm told that like those are the things you dive head first into, right? Now you're supposed to go for those things. So when you finished and came out of when you came to the understanding that golf wasn't what you wanted to do after being sponsored, was there a moment where you were like, okay, I'm done? Was there a day or an instance or a mental thought that occurred, or was it a culmination of all of the years that you had spent golfing at the collegiate level and then apexed at that point? Or what happened that caused you to change that perspective?
I think it was more or less now somebody was willing to like put their own money into me furthering that, I guess, that goal of playing professional golf. And when it was golf scholarship, or when I was getting something out of it, essentially education being paid for, where my parents didn't have to, pay for it or didn't have to go into school debt. So I was getting the scholarship money out of that. But when it came to where somebody was actually going to be putting their money into it and something my heart wasn't into, I just couldn't do that. It just felt at that point it became deceit. Like I was already going against my grain by playing the sport, but now going into somebody, and I worked as hard as anybody on the golf team. So even though I wasn't maybe successful as I wanted to be, I worked very hard at it. I wanted the coaches to know they felt like they were still putting their money into somebody that was appreciating it, but I just still wasn't as successful as I wanted to be. I wasn't making all the tournaments. But when it came to someone willing to sponsor me, at that point, it became an easy decision. I'm like, it's integrity now on that level of somebody else's money. No, I just didn't. So it became an easy decision. And still the golf business was not necessarily what I aspired to do, but again, it was just something that I felt like I still had a contribution to make in teaching somebody else how to play golf. So that's where that kind of decision internally came from me on the playing piece.
What a great perspective to have at such a young age, right? Because it wasn't like when you made that decision, you were in your late 20s, you were still a young adult, and some people may have chose to ride on that bandwagon for a little bit to get some money out of it or for other intentions. And you had the wherewithal, or you were a person of character even back then, I guess I would say, right? You weren't going to go into that and make that commitment. I love hearing this story. It's so cool to me to hear. I didn't even know that you played golf, so it's really cool to hear the whole story about golf, and not only that you play, but that you probably could teach quite a few people some lessons on how to play better. So now I want to lead into your why by kind of segueing to the fact that you hadn't really gone down this road of exploration of knowing your why and articulating it until I reached out to you and said, hey, do you want to be on? And I know that, like you said, our CEO had planted the seed 4 or 5 years ago with what was our motivating factor, what was our why. So tell me a little bit, was this something that coming into today and us talking that you were like actually nose to the grindstone trying to figure out, or was it something that you kind of threw back on your subconscious and said, I'm just going to dialogue about it when I'm in the moment? What was that like?
No, I've been stressing about it since you asked me.
Nice. I had another friend who said the exact same thing. She's like, dude, I lost sleep last night because I'm trying to figure this out. How funny.
Yeah.
So now, I don't want to spend too much time there, but I do want to share. I want you to share with us now, after the hearing your story and hearing that you were stressing about it a little bit. I'm sorry, I didn't mean for that to happen.
No.
Share with us your why.
Awesome. So, and I'll kind of go into another story. I'm being coached through Ignite with Linda Yang. And so I was telling her, because she's been coaching me a little over a year now. And so she walked this part of my journey with me. So I told her that you had asked me this. And when you'd asked me, I was like, that would be way out of my comfort zone. But okay, sure, I'll do it. Because I felt like I've been challenged on this for a while now. And so it was kind of forcing me to really try to articulate it better. I still think it's an ongoing process. I think it always will be. It always should be, I think, in my opinion. But for even back when Steve was like, this was a big slogan of his, and I feel like it was 2016 because we just moved into the new building of Plano, and in Carrollton, and this kind of ties into other areas of my life, questioning that same kind of thing, and that's what you want. And that was what I was getting through my counseling. And because I'd hit some really just kind of 2015 was a really hard year for me, a big life adjustment. And I kind of just I won't say went off the rails, so to speak. I did on one segment of my life, and I didn't really know where that left me. And so a friend of mine recommended me to go to a weekend intensive that's centered around family of origin. So it really kind of takes you back, because a lot of things that are happening in your childhood, even very young, it gets ingrained in your psyche. So whatever your environment was as young, it's going to play out into your adult life. So it really just helps make a lot of sense of the anxieties that I face as an adult, where they stemmed from as even as young as just really young, 1, 2, 3, or 4. And so when that was coupled up with what's your why, and when I would try to go start to ask myself that question, I would get spun up inside, because it was almost like I didn't know what it was. So then I would start shaming myself, because why don't you know what it is? And you should know, and all these other people know. Why don't you know? So then it would just send me in this whole like Tasmanian devil spiral. And so then I would just shut it down. I'm like, I don't need to know what my why is. I feel like I've done it somewhat successfully going up to this point in my life. So I'm just not going to even make myself define what my why is. So then I let myself off the hook. So, but it was more or less going back to what you were talking about, rebellion. I have a very strong rebellion in me. But what's been interesting is that now, where it was rebelling off things that were maybe for my good, but I just it didn't feel that way at the time, so I just wanted to push it away. I feel like that's coming full circle in my life too, and I'm pushing through it. So I want to lean in to anything that I'm rebelling, because I remember telling Linda, I was like, so 2 things that I've learned this year a lot about myself is, one, like how much energy I'll spend when I want to do something. Like if there's something I'm into and want to do it, I will exert as much energy as possible. And then 2 is how much energy I exert in avoiding something I don't want to do. Like it's a lot of energy to just like avoid it. And it was striking to me to put those parallels up. It's like how much energy I'll put into when I want to do it, but when I don't want to, man, I'll put about as much energy, and that was very eye-opening for me. And so it was like trying to lean into the part of it that I'm avoiding. What is that? And so with the why, my faith is my biggest part of me, and so my ultimate why is I want to honor the Lord with my life. So that's kind of my ultimate thing there. That's like my filtering system that I want to go through. So that would be my ultimate why. But there's another layer to it too, in that, so Brene Brown wrote a book called Daring Greatly, and she has a section in her book called Mind the Gap. And she talks about aspirational values that people have, and then your practice values. So it's like you have your values saying, honesty and integrity, but if you were to like put a microscope on what your actions are showing, like, are your practice values lining up with those? And she gave a great example of one being like honesty and integrity, but yet the practice value is like minimalization and taking kind of the easy, rationalize, taking the easy way out. Another one was like your value may be like setting in limits, like moderation, but yet the practice value is rebellion and like not going against it. And I'm all like, oh my gosh, like my gap is like Grand Canyon on some of these things in my life, because I would like to say I'm of honesty and integrity, but then I look at some of the choices I made and it's just, that doesn't line up. So I want to lessen the gap, mind the gap is my other why, is to just really show up as the person I want to show up as and be mindful of really how I'm showing up and the impact I'm having on others and be aware of it. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now that I'm able to kind of define that, because I wasn't able to for a long time. So
when you were considering, I mean, was this something, if you were to go back 5 or 6 years prior to reading Daring Greatly, when you read Daring Greatly and learned about Minding the Gap, right, was that something where a light bulb went on and you said, oh man, 5 years ago or 8 years ago, I was doing exactly this, and that was that the catalyst that kind of swung it, or was it something that maybe you had in your mind as a consideration 5 or 8 years ago, and she just articulated it in a way that allowed you to?
Yeah, I would say that reading it and how she articulated it, it just spelled it out very clearly. Because I've always had this internal battle within me as far as who I am and how I want to be seen. So there's that where I always felt like I was almost a fraud, because I would be this like caricature of myself, because I really wanted, it was a void in me. And this is going back to even early childhood. So I just didn't really have a good identity back then. And so pleasing everyone else to get the validation that I wanted was really what most of my life was. And it's like the word manipulation, I hate saying that because it sounds like it was almost in a deceitful state, but it was more or less a survival skill, because there was just some empty thing going on inside me. And so I was just trying to manufacture ways to try to get me to feel someone of substance. And so, so I always felt like kind of broken, like this fraud, if you will. And so when she did but I always knew the type of person I wanted to be. And I just never felt like I was that. And I remember it hitting me one time in counseling. I was sitting there, I'm like, I feel like now I'm realizing my whole life I was faking to try to be me when I was actually being me the whole time, but I never believed it. So it always felt fake. So when she broke that out as far as aspirational and practice, and being able to identify that as practice being the action that I'm taking, and that I can change that action, to be able to line up more and to put more intention behind that. I don't know, it just hit a light bulb the way she said it, of something I've been feeling for a long time. So she just was able to articulate in a way that made it really jump off the page for me.
Man, there's so much to unpack there. So, I say that because I really believe that this is a relatable thing. I think that so many people, you said a sentence that I had to write down because it just impacted me so much, that you were pleasing other people to get the validation that you wanted. And that there comes a point in everyone's life, I think, where we all kind of have that it's ingrained in us as a child to please our parents. And it's a reward system that by pleasing them, we get this reward of validation and pat on the back and doing a great job. And this is instilled in us, I think, from a very young age. And so it's natural to progress out of that household and that situation to continue that pleasing other people to get validation. And there comes a point when you realize that that's not fulfilling your soul, that's not giving you the validations, begins to feel hollow, I guess is a better way of saying it. So when you get that validation, it no longer has the reward when you're 23 that it had when you were 8 or 10. And so it's logical to think that you would want to progress out of that. I would politely say that I don't think that I would agree with you that manipulation probably isn't the right word. I think it's how we're taught. It's how we're trained. It's how, as a parent, I'm instilling in my kids the benefit of doing good and doing good things and listening and having manners and saying please and thank you and all of these things that we have to teach our kids. There has to be the pat on the back that validates that them doing that is right and not doing it is wrong. And so this structure is created that you're right, we carry into our adulthood, and there's no after parent transition. Like when you move out of mom and dad's house, there isn't somebody that comes to you and says, hey, that whole doing things to please your parents thing, you can stop that now because you're in college or you're an adult. Like there's no little tap on the shoulder that says that, right?
Right. Absolutely.
And so I think if you've never read Finite and Infinite Games, he talks finite and infinite games. There's Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. There's another one called Finite and Infinite Games, and I can't think of the author right now, but he talks about the dawning of a mask in a finite game, that we are all participants in a finite game every single day in our job, as a parent, in our relationships, in everything we do. There's a dawning of a persona that you take on. And that dawning of a persona is not being fake. And they do a really good job of clarifying that, because in a finite game, everybody is a participant. And they use the example of somebody going to see a play, and there's an actress playing Ophelia. And if she's a really good actress, you forget that she is an actress. She is Ophelia. And the words coming out of her mouth are not memorized scripts, but actually the words of Ophelia. And when you buy into that, you buy into the emotion and the story and the plot of everything that's involved in that finite game, in the dawning of the mask. But then he goes on to say, which I thought was really interesting, she gets off the stage now and she is the actress again. And normally afterwards, you get to see the actress no longer as Ophelia, right? She is now the actress who is playing Ophelia. But he said, even in that moment, she still is the actress who played Ophelia. She may not still be the real person that she is, because she still has to don a mask and a persona of the actress who played Ophelia. And it really goes down this rabbit hole of what the finite game is and what this dawning of mask thing is, and that an infinite game, your first why of honoring the Lord with your life is that infinite game, is the game that transcends the game of donning a mask or taking it off, is the life that understands that there's something infinite about the game that we're playing, that it has different rules. It doesn't have a winner and a loser. It doesn't have the same structure as a basketball game or a football game with the same rules and regulations that are agreed upon by all the participants, right? Really deep and profound, but it ties into so much of what you're saying about how you had a persona that you felt like you were faking it. But it turns out all along that it was really you, right? Turns out all along that there you were. One other thing that Darren Hardy says, and there's a term for this that I've learned in the last year or so, called imposter syndrome, where imposter syndrome is even the most renowned business person, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, they all feel like somebody's going to find them out, that they really aren't who everybody has made them out to be, and that they have this fear inside of them that they're going to get found out for whatever it is that they're afraid of. And that's this imposter syndrome. And he explains that everybody has it, that this is normal when you realize a certain level of persona or success or business aptitude, that you're going to have this feeling that somebody's going to find you out, that you've been a fake all along, right? And the reality is it's just you, right? This is just, there is no imposter. You're not going to get found out for anything, right? All along, this is just who you are. So if we go back to you as a child in your teenage years or going into college, if you think about a why back then, number one, was your why back then that above all whys, honoring the Lord, was that something that was in your life then? Was that the transcendent why that stayed with you then? And was there anything underneath that, or is truly what you're doing now, minding the gap, is this the first time underneath that transcending why that you've really had one?
So going back to just because I was really a mess, like if I could just be honest about where I was at that point, because my self-identity was not on any kind of structured foundation. And I grew up in church, so of course, God was something more my parents, like I just grew up in church. So Sunday, I heard somebody tell the joke once, my parents had a drug problem. They drugged me to church every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. So that kind of hit the nail on the head for me, because again, it was theirs. The type of church that we were at didn't really promote a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. So it was just a very boring faith, if you will. And then, so I didn't have that as my personal, just internal desire to honor him. That was not something I had at that age. Although I would have said that I wanted it to be that, because again, I wanted to be the person of honesty, integrity. I've always wanted all that. I never felt strong enough to be able to really live that out. And it took me through a series of life changes that when I was 30, I got back into church, and there is when I made a truly personal decision to rededicate my life to the Lord. And then that sent me on a whole journey of, I did mission trips and prison ministry and led Bible studies. So it became like really my whole world at that point. And then I went through a couple of series of other instances, and my faith in man was rocked, if you would. The Lord, that's never been shifted. My faith in him is very strong, but people, when their actions don't back up their words, that was something that was becoming a huge epidemic in my life as it was hitting me personally. And so I was struggling with, I even stopped going to church because it was like hearing man talk about God. If their actions didn't line up with it, I didn't even want to hear it. And so that led me, that was in 2015. So that's kind of where this whole shift happened in my life. And then I started getting counseling, and pretty consistently, just because, and it was in a group setting. I think individual counseling is great, but it really just still keeps you in your own story. And when you're in an environment of your peers, you get to hear their stories and other stories, and that you're not alone in this. And then it was just a very cool experience for me to get out of my head, because I stay in my head too much, and I listen to my head, and my head sometimes is not me. It's not what I need to be listening to. So I would say that at that point as a teenager, my why was, I wouldn't have had any clue. It was funny in my counseling session, my niece would ask me what my favorite color was, and I'd be like, I don't know what's your favorite color? And then I'll say that's my favorite color, just so we can have that, like, yeah, that's mine too. I just was completely lost internally to be able to make any kind of really solid comment, understanding about me. And that was, It was embarrassing. Here I am, I'm 47 now, and at that point I was about 44, 45. So it was the struggle there of age, but I thought, you know what, the healing that I'm getting now, and then the journey that I'm on right now, to feel confident, and those are my whys. And they may still change, so it may look different, but it felt good to know that I've got those two that truly represent what I'm trying to achieve right now. And now being manager, I have 5 direct reports. And so I'm wanting to embrace, back to the golf thing, I feel like that's a gift. I want to embrace the gifts that he's given me and use it for what he wants, and not being it so selfish if it didn't turn out to be what I wanted, but to make it not about me.
So I want to finish with that. I want you to talk about how golf has come full circle in your life. And now, after going to the collegiate level of golf and almost going pro, deciding it wasn't for you, coming into the mortgage industry, and now do you play golf?
Yes. Yeah, so there's a little small tournament in my small town that gets played every year. My brothers used to play together on it. And my older one said to my younger one, he said, look, I want to start playing with my son, so this will be the last year that we play together. So then my younger brother texted me, and he's just like, hey, do you want to start playing in the Brad Schultz Invitational? And I was like, seriously? Because, again, I golf, like, tournament play, no, it's not anything that I wanted to go back to. It was one thing to be, like, recreational, but now tournament. And my younger brother is, like, my favorite person in the whole world. So him and I have just really been able to connect on a lot of levels as adults. And so when he asked me to play, I thought there's no one else that I would probably do this for, but I'll do it for him. But when we got to play in the tournament, my dad's playing in it, my older brother and his son, my nephew, and then my brother and I. So it was just such a cool experience to have that I remember playing in that tournament, I was like, get over yourself, Kristel. Like, there's so much more here to be really appreciative of than the fact that you don't feel comfortable or confident about your game. I mean, nobody else is judging your game like I judge it. And so it was really trying to get that out of my head and stop making me feel and really just embrace what the blessing of it was. So that's kind of what transitioned. So now I played it the second time in the tournament, and I've played more outside of that. So it's been. Isn't
it fun how that fits perfectly with Minding the Gap, right? Like, you go there and you know the person that you want to be, and here you are on the golf course not being that person. And there's that little voice that comes down and says, hey, you remember this? Like, you said you want to be this way, and here you are, you're not being this way. And that change, it's really cool for me to hear that how everything came back around. And now your appreciation for the game has changed, right? Now it's no longer something that you're being pushed and ushered and forced into, but now it's something that you can step on to the fairway
right.
of your own accord and play the game the way you want to play it, right, with your family and with the camaraderie of your friends. How cool. Thanks so much for sharing that. Now, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, your quote, I want to go back to your quote on Zig Ziglar, because at the beginning of the call, and I didn't have the pen to write it down at that time, but I wanted to ask you, is this, you get what you want when you help others get what they want? Is that kind of essentially what it said?
Yeah, you have everything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want.
Okay. Which is because that's kind of another thing too in this whole why venture, and this tags on to a lot of the other stuff I've struggled with, is making so much stuff about me, and really trying to get other centric. It be outward focused instead of inward. And so that quote was perfect. So thank you for that, because that's another thing that I'm really trying to get more out, is get outward and not inward, where it keeps me stuck. So that's thank you for that.
No problem. It's amazing to me. I think that this is a trait of mankind. I think we all have this tendency to just blow things up in our own minds. Some people obviously way worse than others. And some people to the point of almost paralysis, right, where they don't want to leave their home because they're so wrapped up in their own mind. And for me, I think that those thoughts, Andy Andrews would say those thoughts always exist. You just kind of have to push them into that deep, dark, disgusting corner where they belong and make them stay there. and don't listen to them, because the more you listen to them, the louder they get, the more they encroach out of the corner that they're supposed to be kept in.
Right.
And I mean, even John Gordon, like the master of positivity, he still comes out and says that negativity is normal, that we all experience it, that we all have it. And that big lesson, life-changing lesson for me that I think I've said dozens of times on the podcast is that little voice is not you, right? That little voice is the liar. And that little voice is the trickster. He's not representative of who you are. And so that little naysayer, that little voice that comes in and is spewing hate or spewing vitriol and all these things that come up in your head, that voice isn't representative of who you are. It isn't representative of you as a person. Who you are as a person is who you act out, who you talk, how you act, how you walk, how you treat other people, not the little voice that's inside your head that we all have, who's the naysayer and the liar and the trickster. And I think the moment I realized that voice is a liar, everything changed for me. And I could then begin to transcend that voice and be like, oh, you again. Get back in your corner, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're not having any impact on me today.
Right.
Really cool. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, for sharing your story. And it was really great to hear and learn more about you. And thanks for everything you do for everyone at Fairway and everyone that you interact with. I know how well liked you are and how much people appreciate you. And I appreciate you and our friendship. And I just want to say that, and I want to say thanks.
Well, me as well. Thank you. It's truly a pleasure, and getting to know you more on this. So thank you for that.